Architect and Sustainability Community Lead at Rabobank. Thank you for joining this presentation today. Can someone tell me which movie this image reminds you of? Matrix, indeed. So, with a show of hands, can you tell me if you've heard of the science fiction author Isaac Asimov? Well, yeah. Not too many, but a couple of people said yes. So Isaac Asimov was a science fiction author. In 1950, he published a series of short stories, science fiction short stories, called I, Robot. The storyline is that machines take over the world somewhere in the 21st century. Well, we are now in April 2024, and we are almost a quarter past the 21st century, and computers have indeed taken over the world. In fact, there are more machines and processors in this room now than humans. That includes your smartphones and your laptops. If you take account, they're definitely more than the people here. And they're becoming more and more powerful as we speak. So let me give you an example. Can I ask all of you to take your phones and hold it up like this? Yeah. At first, at a quick glance, I can see that most of you, I think the majority of you have smartphones in your hand. And almost none of you have a phone that looks exactly like this with a physical keypad. It's a vintage phone. So, what happens is that the smartphone that you have, I want you to imagine this. The smartphone that you have is much more powerful than the Apollo 11 guidance computers that were used to send man to the moon. The Apollo 11 guidance computers had a computing power of 14,000 floating point operations per second, whereas the smartphone in your hand has processing power in trillions of operations per second. So you have a neural engine in the palm of your hands. But as Neil Armstrong said, it is indeed a great, let's say, a giant leap for mankind, or in this case, I would say artificial kind. But that power also comes at a cost. You know this one, with great power comes great. Exactly. But what I say is that with great computing power comes greater carbon footprint. Now, what is carbon footprint? It's nothing but an indication of the amount of greenhouse gases emitted, that is the carbon dioxide and methane, as a result of your action. And that includes the software that we create. So today, we are going to look at the 3 Ws of sustainable IT and green software. Why do we need to acknowledge sustainable IT and green software? What is green software, and how do we build expertise around it? And what are the ways in which we can make the most impact? So, why now? Why do we need to talk about sustainable IT now? Maybe let us look at some of the facts. According to the United Nations Environment Program, the tech sector is responsible for 2 to 3% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. Yeah, 2 to 3%. That's not too much, you might think. It doesn't look too much until you compare it to the aviation sector, which is also almost the same amount of greenhouse emissions. And we are not even talking about the global e-waste problem. In 2019 alone, World Health Organization estimates that around 53 million tons of e-waste were generated globally, out of which only 20% was documented to be efficiently recycled. So we have a large-scale problem in our hands, and we need to look for solutions that can address these challenges. So maybe I have a suggestion. Moving to the cloud. How many of you, with a show of hands, think this could solve the problem? No one? One? Okay. And how many think this doesn't solve the problem? Of course, majority. Well, you're all partially right and partially wrong, because moving to the cloud for organizations is a very good first step in reducing the capital expenditure costs. So organizations don't have to build huge data centers and spend millions of euros or dollars in setting up expensive hardware, and also to the skill set needed to run this data center around the clock. Instead, they go to these major cloud providers like Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, of course. And then they have the resources needed. They have scalable data centers. They have reliable data centers. So if one data center is down, the other one ensures business continuity. And they are also sustainable. So how are they sustainable? Most of the global providers, the data cloud providers, they are now carbon neutral data centers. So whatever carbon is emitted, they are able to offset it. And most of them have also promised to go towards net zero emissions. So without using any energy that is generated by fossil fuels, but more using renewable energy like wind turbines or solar energy. So this kind of addresses the problem. But then what is the catch? The catch is that just because it's on the cloud, it's very tempting and easy for the DevOps squad to easily churn up VMs or other instances, cloud instances on the fly, and then easily forget about it. There have been instances wherein there are virtual machines running on the development and the quality environments on the weekends, when it's not even needed at all. So that results in a lot of energy loss as well as loss of money. So optimal usage of cloud resources is key when you move to the cloud. FinOps Foundation is one such foundation which addresses this problem. And I encourage you to go to this site and learn more about how to optimally use your cloud resources. For organizations' point of view, you need to have DevOps squads that are not only having the autonomy to deploy cloud resources, but also have the knowledge to use them optimally. So the suggestion is that you have a trained FinOps DevOps team, and there is a governance of a central FinOps team that monitors the optimal usage of cloud resources. And how do they do that? Well, Power BI comes to the rescue. You have a lot of options in Power BI to create your own dashboards and see whether your cloud resources are performing optimally or not. And it also provides recommendations in case you have to scale down resources based on the business needs. So now, on the one hand, we have talked about addressing the hardware side of things, the infrastructure side of things. But what about the software? That's where green software comes into place. To build expertise around green software, there is the Green Software Foundation. This is a non-profit foundation set up by Microsoft, GitHub, Accenture, and ThoughtWorks, along with the Linux Foundation. So they are a trusted ecosystem of standards and best practices in building and to know more about green software. Incidentally, they also have on the Linux Foundation a free course, free emphasis, which talks about how you can know more about green software. And once you follow the course, you can finish a certification, and then you become green software practitioners. It's a very good boost to your LinkedIn profile as well. Incidentally, the Green Software Foundation has also come up with something called the Impact Framework. It is a kind of a plugin that you can utilize to know the sustainability of your software application. I have a small video here from the Software Foundation itself that explains what this Impact Framework is about.
Impact Framework is a way to compute and report the environmental impacts of software applications accurately. It takes observations you can easily gather about running systems, such as CPU utilization, page views, or number of installs, and converts them into environmental impacts like carbon, water, and energy in an auditable, replicable, verifiable, and transparent way. Working with Impact Framework is like working with a set of building blocks we call plugins. Plugins work together in a pipeline, each doing its part in converting observations into impacts. The plugin ecosystem is growing fast. You choose the plugins that calculate the specific environmental impact you're interested in. You can use plugins from the ecosystem or develop your own. Simply add them to your pipeline. With Impact Framework, the possibilities are as expansive as the ecosystem it thrives in. The magic happens in the manifest file, a comprehensive record housing your observations, plugins, configuration, assumptions, and computed environmental impact. Transparency becomes the norm as you open up your manifest file. Using Impact Framework is like sharing the entire recipe instead of just the finished dish. We believe in verify, don't trust. Others can rerun your manifest file, verify your findings, or even challenge your assumption. When you use Impact Framework, you are taking a step towards decentralizing impact measurement and democratizing data. Something big is happening here. We're liberating measurement. With Impact Framework, if we can observe something, we can measure its impact. What observations can you make about the software you want to measure?
I hope this gave a good overview of the Impact Framework. For more details, I encourage you to go to the Green Software Foundation website and see for yourself and do more hands-on approach on how you can use Impact Framework on your software applications. For all the Microsoft fans out there, and it's safe to say that most of you are, they also have a course called the Principles of Sustainable Software Engineering. I urge you to go through this to the Microsoft Learn page and also get yourself familiar with sustainable IT and green software. So let's say you have taken my suggestion and then you've gone through the courses, you've gotten yourself certified as a green software practitioners and also FinOps certified. What can you do now with all this knowledge? How do you spread this knowledge and how do you make sure everybody else also knows about this and communicates about it? There are different ways to do it, to communicate and collaborate. For example, within Rabobank, I work for Rabobank. Within Rabobank, we have a green software or let's say sustainability community, wherein we talk about all things that are sustainable and that there is a specific group for sustainable IT. And there we talk about what best practices we can implement, what are the practical scenarios that we encounter and what lessons we have learned. So that's within the Rabobank community. You can also do that, set it up within your organizations and promote this culture of green software and sustainable IT. Green Software Foundation also has a very active forum with experts around the globe talking about what are the lessons learned and what are the latest trends in green software and sustainable IT. I encourage you to also visit their forum to know more about it. For people within Netherlands, of course, recently one of my colleagues, he's started a meetup called Sustainable IT in Netherlands. We have had, I think, 2 meetups so far with a lot of support from the tech community. I encourage you to also join this community, the meetup, and visit our events. The Green Software Foundation recently also completed a hackathon called Carbon Hack 24. Incidentally, tomorrow is the awards ceremony. You can still go and view the ceremony to see which are the winning teams, what practical ways have they utilized the impact framework, and why they won, and what was the business scenario in which they implemented it. So now we talked about why we need to acknowledge green software, sustainable IT, what are the ways in which we can build expertise around it, and how do we communicate and collaborate around it to make the most impact. I leave you now with a final slide on the United Nations Act Now webpage. Act Now is the United Nations campaign to inspire individuals like you and me to contribute towards sustainable development goals. If you think or if you're having doubt whether your contributions as an individual can have any impact, I want you to think of the butterfly effect. According to chaos theory, when a butterfly flaps its wings somewhere in these Amazonian jungles in South America, it sets off a chain of events that leads to a cyclone in North America. Such is the power of that small action, and such is the power of that small butterfly. Ladies and gentlemen, I see that butterfly in each one of you. So flutter your wings, take action, and make an impact. Thank you.
Hello. So today we're going to talk about hot compatibility, the new kid on the block. Thank you all for being here. Maybe first some quick facts about myself. I'm Jarne Van Aerde. I'm from Belgium. Quick raise of hands, who is also from Belgium? Somebody? It seems I'm alone today. Not to worry. I'm also an IT consultant from InfoSupport. And I immediately want to dive into a problem here. So you may have navigated to your favorite website or your application, and you may saw a screen that looked like this, right? A maintenance screen. Oh God. Well, nobody likes this, right? But the reason why a lot of websites need to put this up is because they are deploying a new version of their software to the application, and they can't do that in a compatible way. Now, hot compatibility is actually tries to solve that problem so that we no longer have to have those maintenance screens. Now, I want to tell you guys a little story today about a fictive company. Well, I say fictive, but I think most of you guys probably know what company am I talking about. I'm talking about Route Delivery. So Route Delivery, there are a few characters for my story. We have Jeffrey. Jeffrey is kind of like the CEO of the company. We also have Fred. Fred is the IT consultant that is going to implement the awesome new features for Route Delivery. And then we also have Ellen. Ellen is one of the biggest clients of Route Delivery. Now, the application of Route Delivery already exists for a few years. It's pretty mature, but now the business also has a new feature request for us. So the new feature request is the following. So right now, currently, the delivery driver is able to register their preferred payment methods on how they would like to be paid by the restaurant for their services. But in the future, it should also be possible for the delivery driver to register multiple preferred payment methods. So currently, that might look something like this, the data structure. We have the names of the delivery drivers, and we also have their payment method, kind of like in an enum format. And we might want to change that to something like this, where we have an array structure with multiple preferred payment methods. So we need to do some kind of a data migration here. Now, if we look at the situation for Ellen, Ellen also has this table, of course, but Ellen was one of the biggest clients, 500 records. So 500 delivery drivers have registered for her restaurant alone. Now, before we let Fred implement this feature, I want to quickly give you guys some details about the deployment process of Route Delivery. So, first of all, Route Delivery is pretty large. So in the cloud, we have multiple backend and front-end instances running at the same time. If we want to go to production, we are going to do a rolling deploy that is going to take the instance of a service out of rotation and put a new version of that service into rotation. So during those 45 minutes, we have old and new versions of the backend and of the front-end in production at the same time. We also have some load balancing here. So that can, for example, mean that your front-end during such a rolling deploy can, for one request, go to an already updated backend, but then for the next request, it still goes to an old backend. Also interesting to note here is that our migrations, they will happen at the beginning of our rolling deploy, before we start with that. Now, right, now we got that all out of the way, Fred is going to start implementing this feature. So he's going to make the necessary code changes. He's going to alter that table. So he's going to add a new column to provide that array data structure. After that, he's also going to prepare a migration script so that we can migrate over all of the data. And when we're done with that, yeah, we can, of course, just safely delete the old column, right? And then we're going to deploy to production. Would be fun if it was that easy, right? So every developer probably had one point in their career where they went like, oh, what could possibly go wrong here? And yeah, during the deployment to production, some things do go wrong. So the application starts crashing multiple times. Now, why is that? Now, that is because during the rolling deployment, we still have those old backend services that are trying to access the old payment method column, which is now gone because of the migration that has already run. Now, Ellen is, of course, not very happy with this. She says, I'm losing time, I'm losing money. Root delivery is going to pay for this. Because of that, Jeffrey is also not pretty happy. Let's not talk about Jeffrey. But luckily, Fred kind of like apologizes, and he tells Jeffrey that he will look for a better way in the future on how to solve this. So let's actually now talk about hot compatibility. What is this? So basically, hot compatibility has three phases. We have expand, migrate, and contract. Now, each of those phases comes with one or multiple deployments to production in order to have that smooth transition. So let's look at this in a little bit more detail. We have our vCurrent and vNext. So during a rolling deployment, the vCurrent stands for the old backend service, for example, and the vNext stands for the already updated new backend service. In the first step, the expand step, we're going to prepare our data structure or application to add something new. We're going to store some data in parallel. So here that would mean we would have a migration that is going to add that new database column with the array structure. And if we look at this from a read and write perspective, the only thing we're going to do here is to start storing our data in parallel. We're not going to migrate over any data just yet here. Now, in the second phase, the second deploy, we actually go over to the migrate phase. And here we are going to write a migration script. But what we're also going to do is we're going to switch reading from the old data to switch to reading to the new data. And now we can safely do that because in the previous step, so any changes that are made during the preferred payment method, they are safely saved. And also all of our data is now migrated over, so no errors can be made here. And after that, we can also stop writing to the old data. Now, you might be wondering here, but Jarne, can't I just do this in one deploy? Well, you could if you only had one front-end and one back-end service. But with our implementation, we have old and new back-end services into rotation at the same time. So doing that in one step might result in, for example, somebody updating something with a new backend service who only writes to the new stuff, but then you might go to some overview page afterwards, which is on an old backend service, and he will only read the old data. So then the person who is requesting that suddenly sees outdated data during your rolling deploy. We don't want that, and that is the reason for those two deploys. Now, for the last phase here, we also have a contract phase, which is actually pretty simple. Now that we have completely detached from the old structure, from the old database column, we can just safely delete our code. So it's that simple. Now, looking at this in a little bit more detail, for the expand phase, that would mean that we would add that new column, still in a nullable state at this point in time. Now, after the expand, it might look something like this. For example, Anna updated her preferred payment method, so the data would be stored in parallel. The migrate, here we're going to migrate over all of the data. And here the contract is just getting rid of that old column. So this might have been a very specific scenario for hot compatibility, but hot compatibility is everywhere. You just have to look for it. So any database change where you might need to migrate over some of the existing data, you might want to have a look at hot compatibility. But also for API changes. If you deploy your front-end and back-end separately, you might have a front-end that is calling a specific API endpoint. You might want to change that endpoint. You can also do that in a hot compatibility way. And here you only need one migration step instead of two because you're not doing anything database related. And those two deploys on the migrate step were really because we were doing something with the database. Now, and just in general, if you have downtime right now for your application, just think about why that is. Is it because of some of the problems I just described? Because then maybe you can solve it with hot compatibility. Now, this was a very quick and short story about a fictive company named Rue Delivery, but I can imagine that we all have those businesses and projects who could benefit from this technology. I want to thank you for joining this presentation of mine, and I hope that you also enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you for choosing this room right now. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about accessibility. Who of you went to the 1, 2, 3 testing talk by chance? Great. Maybe there was some commercializing there that you guys came over here. It won't be the most technical talk you will see today. It's more about how you can actually use it. So, when you ask ChatGPT, how would it look if you have accessibility powered by AI, you get these images. Of course, not really what I was looking for as an intro, but I thought it fitted nice with the color scheme of the conference, so I left them in. About a month ago, there was a very, very high-regarded person who wrote a very controversial blog post about accessibility and AI, and I thought it would be a nice opening statement. Has anybody heard of Jakob Nielsen, perchance? Yes? So he's called the king of a lot of things, and he has 41 years of experience in UX development, and he said the following: accessibility movement has miserably failed. Try generative AI. So he told us, okay, people, we've been doing this for 30 years. It's not working. We are failing as a community. So we should just use AI and it will solve all our problems, right? Who thinks that could be the case? No? Good. I think it's a good tool. And I'm going to show you today how I personally use that tool when I think accessibility and applications and users. But I don't think it's the full solution. There still needs to be a person behind the computer telling the AI what to do. So I hope to inspire you a little bit today and show you how I use it. And maybe you think, hey, that's quite a good idea. Maybe I can use it in the same way. But first, I always like to, oh, that's very white, I'm sorry if you're blinded. I would like to talk about what is accessibility, because before we can actually create accessible applications, it's good to understand who we are creating it for. And there's 3 groups. I like to group them in 3 groups. And the first one is permanent disabilities. It's the things you think about when developing for disabilities. So think about physical disabilities, auditory disabilities, visual disabilities, so blind people, people that are colorblind. We have, of course, more of the mind disabilities, things like dyslexia, which I myself have, maybe some ADHD, stuff like that. And of course, you also have a group that has been born with a chromosomal issue, which also, and these are permanent disabilities. You can't really get rid of them and you learn to live with them, but it would be really nice if we make applications that help these people along. And it's about 12% of the Dutch population above 12 who has one or more of these disabilities. So it's actually quite a large chunk of people who live with this day to day, which we could help. The second group is the temporary disabilities, because, of course, there are also people who don't suffer for it for the rest of their lives. And maybe those are the people that actually need us more, because they are not attuned to doing it every day. They only have maybe a month or so, and we could really help them out. And in this group, there might also be some, things you haven't thought about. For example, young parents. I myself had a daughter 9 months ago, and I know the struggle. When you are postpartum, you have the tiny little baby in your arms, and then all of a sudden you only have one hand left because the other one is busy and occupied with a small child. A lot of annoyances I had online shopping, because when you just had a child, you don't think, hey, let's go shopping, let's go outside. You want to do it online. A lot of issues. So try to think about it. Of course, you can get sick and you might have some recuperation to do. If you broke your leg, if you broke your arm, you also have only one arm, but it's not for the rest of your life. But it's still an annoying 6 to 8 weeks. Low literacy, something to think about. There are people who are not as schooled as we might be all in this room, right? Most people in IT have quite a high IQ and quite a high level of education, but that's not true for everybody using your applications. So try to think about it when you write texts, that it's understandable for everybody. And the same category goes for people who may be coming into a new country, need to learn a new language. In the Netherlands, we have a lot of expats coming in, and they might not be that familiar with the Dutch language, especially when they go to the government sites, which you can't really avoid nowadays. Think about it. Try to make it multilingual, or just use the easiest language you can. This one I always find quite fun. If you forgot your headset. Sometimes you need to interact with audio. For example, you're doing trainings for your company, like the security trainings that we all have to go through. Very interesting, but they are mandatory. You have to tick the list. And when you don't have your headset, you might not be able to do it right when you want to. So sometimes it's really nice to have just some text underneath, so you can listen to it without audio. But this is also a very temporary disability. But good to know nonetheless. If we take these into account, next to the one with the permanent disabilities, you get about 20% of the population in the Netherlands. But, of course, this is only what we can measure. When you broke your leg, there are statistics about you. When you're pregnant, maybe not so much, and definitely not when you forgot your headset, so it's a really big chunk. Last category is age. It's a very bold question, of course, and feel free not to answer, but who in this room is above 40 years old? Quite a chunk. So when we look at the statistics, so in the line here above, you see 2022, that's the most recent I have, and everything from the line green and upwards is 40 and above. So it's 53% of the population. And that's the point in your life when your eyesight starts to deteriorate a little bit. So you might want to push up the zoom on your screen. So maybe go for 125% instead of 100%. And I'm not going to ask who's 65 and over, but that group also has hearing deterioration and cognitive deterioration. So it's harder to understand. And it's the modern world, you know, you can't really not be on the internet, and you have to interact with it. So we better make sure that we develop for these people as well. So that's a bit of theory about accessibility. Now I also have some theory about AI. Luckily for you, I'm not an expert, so it's a really easy theory. What is AI? It's a big black box of magic, I like to call it. A lot of stuff going inside there. A lot of very, very, very smart people who figured this out, and I'm happy that I'm not working on that, but I can use it. What can you do? So you put some input into the big black box of magic, and you get some output. And I like to say, shit in, shit out. You will figure out why I say that in just a minute. And the input can be many things. The output can be many things. It can be images, it can be text, it can be code, it can be music, it can be movies. Everything's possible nowadays with AI. And the magic can be as easy as just a decision tree. Like, I see white snow on the floor, or I see snow on the floor, can I eat it? Is it white? Yes, I can eat it. Is it yellow? No, I cannot eat it. That could be AI already. But you also have the very beautiful, important neural networks. Not gonna go into detail because I don't know shit about it, but I know how to use it, and that's the most important part. So when I ask AI something very simple, can you create a Hello World HTML page for me? And now we really go into how to use it. I get this. Exactly what I asked for, right? Hello World page, very beautiful. This is a case of shit goes in, shit comes out. I ask a very plain question, but if I ask the same AI, can you create an accessible Hello World page? I get this, a little bit more filled, but you can see up top we have a simple language tag. We have the car set, which is very nice for the screen readers. We see some area tags. So AI can produce accessibility, but you do have to ask for it. So the same as when you code, and you have to keep accessibility in mind before something accessible comes out, you also have to keep accessibility in mind when you interact with AI. This is the same for any topic. If you want something, and especially for the non-functionals like accessibility. If you want something that's really performant, maybe ask, can you create a performant HTML Hello World page? HTML is not the best example here, but you can ask what you want, but you still have to keep in mind what you want and work with it. I have some time, I think, for a quick demo. Very quick. No, I actually don't have time anymore. Oh, still going to show you. In Visual Studio Code, you of course have the Copilot, and I would like to challenge you to not actually use the standard Copilot that you can use, but you also have the Copilot chat function. And with that, you can use the same old Copilot, generate some code for me, which is nice. But you also can chat with it just like in the browser, and you actually get some response. So if you're new to accessibility or new to something else in development, ask it, because it will give you some context and it will give you examples. And that's the best way to learn, because it can be so challenging to try to do everything right. And when you try something new, it's so much information, but AI can really help you filter what you need to know. So example here is that I asked about area tags in my code. Can you show me how? And it gave me a lot of information about area tags. So I don't want to steal your lunch time, so quickly go back to the presentation. Yes. So I'm Ramona. I didn't introduce myself yet. I'm a software engineer at Team Rockstars IT. I'm an agile enthusiast. I talk about accessibility and inclusivity as a woman in tech. And I am a public speaker, and I love to be here for you guys. I sent you home with the power of words. It's all in your question when working with AI. Thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day.